Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by Nate Weitzer. He's on the East Coast. We've got play props here on NBA Sunday game day 2 of these game ones in the NBA playoffs as we roll along. Definitely want to subscribe to that page. We've also got a video with best bets up here for Sunday as well. And we're going to be bringing these to you each and every day now moving forward in this postseason. Also head to thelines.com and use that prop finder tool, as important as ever now, as you're getting a bunch of different books to give you these odds this season. You find the best ones there using that tool under the NBA tab up there. So make sure you're checking that out. Nate, let's go ahead and jump right into your first NBA play a prop for today. For Sunday, rather.
J-Dub and the Thunder, while I don't like them to necessarily cover 8 points, I think he's going to be over 18.5 points individually because the Pelicans have done such a good job on SGA for starters. But I mean, mostly because J-Dub is just freaking amazing and just hasn't played that many minutes down the stretch. He really should be the most improved player. It looks like odds are saying it's Tyrese Maxey for sure. But at least some people are saying this should be J-Dub, like based on his play on both ends. And the thing is, now he doesn't have to guard Zion. So much more energy can be expended on the offensive end of the floor. So he's only averaged 17.5 against NOLA over the last 2 seasons, but now he's going to be a much more effective offensive player, I think. Also, like the Thunder played so many blowouts that he's only averaging 29 minutes per game since the break. And the usage is up though to 25%. He's still scoring about 20 points per game in those 30 minutes, but per 36, he averages 22 points. He's attacking the rim, getting the mid range, like just such higher usage than as a rookie. Of course, that's why we're talking about most improved. In 3 against NOLA, 24% usage. So he's making Zion work on the other end if that is his matchup. And then, you could put Dort on Ingram and still save J-Dub for offense. Look, I mean, I don't think Chet's going to have a particularly good offensive series here. I think SGA is going to see a lot of doubles and a lot of different looks from all these Pelicans wing defenders, and then it's going to fall on J-Dub to be the secondary creator, which he's done in spades all season, really.
He really has, and he continues to. I thought this would open at about 20.5 points, to be honest with you, and we're still seeing this thing down at 18.5. This is one of my favorite players in the league. I do think he's going to be crucial to what they're going to be doing in this series, where there's going to be a lot more wing play. Let's put it that way. Without Zion, especially, talked about that in the best bets video, and that's fine for J-Dub because he's basically going to be power forward at times, shooting guard at others, but either way, he's the secondary option, and we'll find those mismatches for sure. So let me kick things off here with the Zynga in that Miami and Boston series. We'll take Kristaps Porzingis over 7.5 boards. Still get some pretty good juice on that, or the double-double there for him as well. If you think he can get up to the 10 boards, which is basically what we're saying there, because I definitely think he's good for the points with a much higher point prop, obviously. Kristaps back in the playoffs. First time he's been there since 2021 when he wasn't quite asked to do as much, right, on that Mavs squad, and things did not turn out very well there in Dallas. And now he's definitely not being told to just go stand in the corner and wait. Nobody puts baby in the quarter, that's for sure. Not on the Celtics anyway. And KP is going to be a lot more involved in that rim running game as well, and playing that pick and roll on offense with Jason Tatum, which they're going to be crashing those offensive boards. I think that's going to be a huge problem for Miami, as good as they've been on the defensive boards. I do think they need Jimmy in there, and they're going to be lacking for size. Let's put it that way. You've got Bam, and once you put KP out there, there's going to be a bunch of mismatches. But this is what they've been waiting for Kristaps. Like they have used him somewhat sporadically. I think they've used him really well, to be honest. I've been very impressed with the way that they've incorporated him into the office. But then also because they have Papa Al as sort of a your turn, my turn in terms of the big guys on the court, they've definitely been able to conserve him and keep him from getting too many points. But if you look at his per 36 versus this team, where against Miami this season, he's averaged about 32 minutes a game in that series, but you put him at the per 36, where now it's the handcuffs are probably off a little bit more. Now you're talking about him averaging nearly 9 rebounds per game in the per 36, and I think you do put him at about 34, 35 minutes, and you also want to continue to conserve guys like Al Horford for the rest of the playoffs as well. But what he's been doing post All-Star break too, really seems like focusing on the boards, and in part I would say because of the fact that he's played a lot more lineups where he's the one of the sole big man, because they're totally fine with JB and JT as their forwards, if you will, moving forward with KP on the floor there. He's looking at about 8 rebounds per game in 29 minutes per game since the All-Star break, which is definitely where we've seen his minutes slow down a bit more so that they could kind of conserve him for this, but still at about a 48% contested rebound rate. So he's still going up and getting those boards, not just responsible, obviously, for boxing guides out. If you look at what he does on 3 days rest as well, and he's get this amount of rest, which is going to always be helpful for a team like the C's, 30 and a half minutes per game, where he's averaging about 8.1 boards in that time frame. And on the season versus Miami in those situations, 20.3 points per game and then 7.3 boards. But that's all in 27 and a half minutes that he played against Miami this season. And yeah, like you said, like the minutes going up for KP is a huge part of this moving forward. I would expect this Heat offense to continue to struggle on and especially with the effective field goal percentage without Jimmy Butler. He just as much of a facilitator, to be honest, and at least the attention that he draws on the offense. Like there's nobody else, Bam included, that draws the ire of the defense the way that Jimmy Butler does, and they're focused on where he's at. I think that's a huge part of why they haven't been, without him basically since January 1st. We're talking about 107 points per game in those games without him, and about 45% from the field, 35% from deep. They really need to get those numbers up. They turn into just too much of like a jump shooting team that needs those guys to score. So I think we'll see Jaime Jaquez try to get in there and play as that sort of like, let me be the 4 in this situation. But I don't know that necessarily is good for trying to go ahead and battle with KP. Like there's going to be a mismatch on the floor at some point with size for this Boston team. And I expect KP to be able to take advantage of that when Bam has to help off. It's stuff like that. It's going to be a problem for people, and he'll be probably left for some tip-ins and things like that. It's scary to even think about taking Miami plus 13 in this one, to be honest with you, although that is a massive spread for a Miami Heat team in the playoffs.
Miami is plus 360 to win a game in this series, right? Plus 2.5. Without Jimmy Butler, like we're not buying into them beating Chicago, mucking it up against Philly. Like there's going to be some demons exercised here for the Celtics, for the guys that were on this team in the past, for Drew Holiday, who got torched last year in the playoffs, and for Porzingis, who, like you said, was asked to just go stand in the corner and never post up with Dallas. And now his post ups maybe the most efficient play in the league this year. And yeah, they've managed him so conservatively, 29 minutes per game since the All-Star break. He's averaging this many rebounds. So yeah, give him 32 plus and let's see if he can put that double up. I mean, I'd certainly think he can with the amount of shots that Miami is going to miss. So in this Clippers game, we don't know if Kawhi is playing or not, but either way, give me over 2.5 turnovers for James Harden. Just the sheer amount he's going to handle the ball, which will probably go up if Kawhi doesn't play. He's averaged 3.3 turnovers in 11 played without Kawhi this year. That's in only 32 minutes per game. We're probably talking about closer to 40 minutes now that we're in the playoffs here. Dallas had forced double-digit turnovers in 12 straight with their starting lineup. We talked about how good that defense has become. They're top 10 in turnovers, forced on the road. Also, bottom 10 in assists allowed. So that indicates like they're gonna have these opportunities for Harden to get in the lane and try to make passes. And sometimes it will result in potential assists. Sometimes it will be turnovers. With Philly, when he was in that role, that heliocentric run the offense role, 3+ turnovers in 18 of his 23 playoff games, including 13 straight at one point. So, I mean, he's turning it over 3.8 times per 36 minutes throughout his career. He has the same turnover rate with the Clippers as he did with Philly, lower assist rate. So, I mean, there's a little bit fewer passes being made, but that does go up if Kawhi is not healthy, like I'm saying. And then there's a head-to-head bet that I did take on DraftKings, which is just Luka to have more assists than Harden. And I mean, that's a little iffy depending on how Ty Lue decides to attack Luka, right? It's like, is he going to just accept the fact that he's scoring a lot and try to hold down everybody else? Well, at least at the end of the last series in 2021 between these two, Luka had 14, 11, and 14 assists as Ty Lue was forced to kind of just try to stop him and he allow him to spray the ball out to other people. I mean, Luka is the leader in the NBA in potential assists, leader in assist to pass ratio, lethal passer. Like I'll take him over James Harden, who can't force help. Like at this point, like Dallas can just guard him one-on-one. Even if they just put like Kyrie on him, I don't trust James Harden to break him down and get open looks for other people in the playoffs. Like I do not trust it.
Fair. Yeah. I definitely remember fading Harden for most of this of the season playoffs last year, and he came through a couple more times than I think we expected in a much different situation. With at this point, I'm not going to say more talent around him. I mean, if Kawhi plays, that's definitely not true. But if Kawhi doesn't play, you could easily make the case that Harden had more talent around him on Philly when Embiid was healthy. Obviously, it's the same concept with Kawhi. So I do like the comp here for those two dudes in terms of taking Luka to get more assists than Harden. Yeah, I definitely would concur with that. I was looking at what to do with Harden, and it was like nothing, to be honest with you. And Russ didn't even have props up here in a minute, as he does a little bit more with Kawhi out than Harden necessarily does. But let's talk about Kawhi for a minute. And there's a couple looks here, because I do think if Kawhi's not in there, you can consider a Joe Val under. That was one thing that we both liked that we're considering. I mean, maybe not the rebounds for Joe Val, but like I think Larry Nance is a better fit in that series. I just wanted to mention that I definitely like a bit of a fade of Valanciunas if Kawhi is not available, so that I'm not just leaving you guys high and dry here without a pick. But I do think Kawhi is a good point getter here in this game if he plays, even with whatever's going to be in his knee in this one. Like if he goes in the playoffs, it's a bucket time for him. And he's played 26 games here with the Clippers in the postseason, averaging damn near 30, 29.5 points per game, 29% usage, and he plays 40 minutes, right? Like that's what they get from him in the playoffs as such an important player on both sides of the floor, especially. But for the points, like I do think we'd probably see this a little bit higher, maybe at like 26.5, if there wasn't any kind of question marks around his health. And I mean, if he plays though, like I'm assuming it's not to be this decoy style thing. Like they're going to have him out there to do his thing. And if you look at the last 2 years, he's played 13 games in the playoffs, 31 a game with some really nice splits, 57% from the field, just knocking down that mid-range monster. And then 42%, very efficient from his threes as well, and 88% from the line, getting to the line 7 times, which is a huge component that this Clippers team would need to beat this Mavs team. Essentially, really got to at least put some pressure on them down low. Despite how much better they've gotten at defending down low, you got to like help Zoo out with another dude who you at least have to like keep an eye around the basket and going to the basket for him. Similar to how I was talking about Zion being so important to the Pelicans offense for the fact that he drives the most to the rim. That's also the case here for Kawhi, who's going to be scoring closest to the basket other than Zubac if he's in there. So look, you got to think about the rest. Like if he is healthy, he's sat for a reason at the end of the season. I'm sure they weren't like wanting to play him big minutes anyway, despite the fact that he had to sit out because that 4 seed was wrapped up pretty much with like a week and a half, 2 weeks left in the season. We knew that this was probably going to be the series, short of if the Mavs kind of like fell out of things, which they obviously didn't, and only continue to get better, which I still like them to win. But even with Kawhi in there, like the way that he plays against this team too, right? Like we love these battles of like Kawhi versus Luka, and I do think Luka is going to be doing his thing. I think he might be scoring a bit more, but even though I still think he's probably good for at least 9, maybe 10 assists for Luka. He'll be scoring plenty, and it'll be a little bit more of a back and forth with Kawhi, handling things, because the ISO defense, especially, that's the last point I'll bring up. The ISO defense for the Mavs, it's gotten better. I'll definitely say that. But they kind of have gone from a team that's just full of long stretch wings that can defend guys like Kawhi to now much more of a traditional, like we've got a power forward and we have 2 centers and, we have guys playing their actual position in a way that like there's no DFS, there's no Dorian Finney-Smith. There's like a lot less wing defense for this Mavs squad in a way that like where Kawhi wants to live out in that extended elbow in places is going to be a pretty good spot for him to get some points.
Yeah, I mean, is it just gamesmanship? How much they're listing him as questionable leading up to this? I mean, he sat out the last 12 games of the regular season, or was that just to make sure that he's right for game 1 and beyond? Because we've seen him come out like a bat out of hell, at least in the playoffs last year, right, and the year before, and then eventually he just had this kind of catastrophic knee injury. And so I don't know if the Clippers were just managing him down the stretch in preparation for him to be ready for the long haul. Everything just hinges on that. Is this for real, this knee inflammation, or is this just trying to throw off the Mavs game plan? And if they are throwing off the Mavs game plan, then the Clippers are like the Bucks. They have some value here as they've swung from favorites to big underdogs with home court here, with Kawhi ready to just be the playoff killer he is. I think the safest bet, though, is like as long as he's active, he's getting 25 points. Like because again, we don't trust Harden. And we know Kawhi can get his against whoever the Mavs are going to throw at him individually in ISO.
Exactly. Yeah. That and there's just as much of a lack of trust in also PG probably, who just feels like a forgotten piece in this Clippers team at this point with how important Kawhi is and how much we're talking about his injury. But either way, yeah, we definitely like a lot more playoff Kawhi than playoff P, as he's called himself in the past. But that is all the time that we have for you in playoff props here for Sunday in the NBA. Make sure to subscribe to that page and continue to follow along all playoffs with us with those best bets and playoff props. And until we see you next, happy betting.